Okay, it's been a couple days, and I originally wasn't going to cover this, but I decided I do have something to add to it, so if you don't like that, I don't really care what you think. We're talking about review bombing. Was that, like, overly hostile? I feel like that was super hostile for no reason, and I apologize. So recently, Valve issued an update to how information is displayed on Steam reviews, and what they did, they didn't remove anything. What they added in was a graph that kind of shows you what the positive and negative reviews were like over the lifespan of the game. So if you look at the graph, it's like, okay, at the start, this game had only positive reviews, and then something happened with the development somewhere along the line. More negative reviews came in, there was fan backlash, or it could be the exact opposite. Maybe a game wasn't reviewed very well upon release, but as updates came in, maybe there were more positive reviews, and it's a graph to show you that, so you know what the current trend of the game is like. And the update was made to indirectly combat the issue of review bombing that's become very prevalent on Steam and other gaming platforms over the last few years or so. And if you're not aware, review bombing is the process of mass downvoting a game by a group of players over reasons that aren't necessarily tied to the video game itself, but more often than not tied to developer practices or publishers and outside sources. And what review bombing does is it lowers the overall score on Steam in an attempt to both voice criticism as well as potentially dissuade other people from being interested in the game, because obviously if you go onto a Steam store page and you see like, oh, a game has mixed or negative reviews, you're instantly going to be less interested in trying that game out. Now, I'm firmly in the camp of people should be reading and understanding reviews from various different sources before buying a game, but, you know, the general populace is never going to do that. They're just going to look at a score and be like, oh, this game has a 90, it has to be good. That's the world we live in. Think about it. So obviously developers and publishers don't like that because it can lead to mass downvoting and lower overall scores on their games, which can impact their sales. And in some of their minds, they do believe that it isn't warranted criticism that doesn't necessarily affect the game itself. So that raises the question, is it okay to review bomb due to outside sources even though it might not affect the actual gameplay? It's a little bit of a gray area, and I can see the arguments for both sides, but at the end of the day, I'm going to fall on the side that it is legitimate criticism and something that consumers should be aware of. Therefore, I don't really see a problem with voicing your disdain for outside sources that might not be related directly to gameplay. Now, to clarify, I don't necessarily think that all review bombing is warranted, because a lot of the time the reviews that are left there aren't really constructive anyways, but that's more general Steam review problems rather than like review bomb problems specifically. I think in the case of review bombing, if it's for legitimate concerns about a company or their practices or recent releases or updates with a game, I think that is a valid way to voice your opinion. So for instance, say we somehow discover that the developer of a new hit survival game throws shoes at puppies as a hobby. That's probably prudent information to know, and when most consumers hear about that, or potential players, they're probably going to be like, well, I don't want to support this guy, so I'm not gonna buy their game. And I do think something like that is very valuable purchaser information. If you head over to a Steam page for a game like Days of War, you can kind of see this happening in real time. Over the past few months, the developers of Days of War have been releasing updates that the player base isn't happy about. They've removed features like ADS, for example, and while they gave reasons for that, the general player base seems to not agree with it. And until recently, on the Steam page for Days of War during the trailer, you could still see ADS clearly being used. That's very important information for a potential purchaser, because they can go down to the reviews and see, oh my god, they don't have ADS in their game. Or they can see that there's only 2 players online according to this person. Which is also true, by the way, and that's really not a good thing at all. So in a case like that, review bombing is very much warranted because it lets the consumer have easier access to potential negative information about a publisher, developer, or even the game itself. And here's the thing too, we only ever really touch on negative review bombing, but positive review bombing does happen as well. And usually that's because a developer or a publisher does something that's very consumer friendly, or they're very open with their player base, or they make a good video game. Yeah, I know, it's kind of shocking, right? Someone making a good video game because they want to make good video games? That's insane. So it seems to me, and this might sound crazy to some people, that if you do things that are beneficial for the consumer, and make a good video game, you're gonna get a lot more praise and a lot more positive review volume than if you do things that people will consider to be anti-consumer. Does that make sense? Did I explain myself properly? So I guess the point of this video is to let developers know that review bombing does suck, but if it's happening to you, is there a reason for that? Think really hard about why consumers are driven to leave negative reviews for your product. Do they have a legitimate concern? And instead of saying that everyone who reviews things doesn't know what they're talking about, you probably want to listen to some of the people that kind of do. So I don't know, I guess the only advice I can really give you is be active with your consumer base and be more like Larian Studios and less like Driven Arts, because, you know, good games and good PR are probably gonna help you avoid getting review bombed. And it's also things that people do and they care about the industry and the people that are playing their games. Who would have thought?